So, hey, real quick, if your project schedule looks like it was built in 1997, it's probably because it was. Some scheduling software out there, and you know which ones I'm thinking of, haven't exactly kept up with the times. And let's be honest, nobody opens those schedules and feels great about it. So, Planair is a modern CPM scheduling platform built for construction teams who actually want to use their schedule. So, real time, collaborative, visual, and powerful enough to handle the complexity without making you hate your life. There are better ways to plan, and Plein Air is one of them. Check them out. Well, hey man, Angelo, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me, man. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me. I've been following you and really appreciate what you're doing for the industry and looking forward to getting into it today.
Well, I appreciate that. Likewise, I think you and I have had a couple conversations, and when you interact with folks in the industry, I think we often kind of go to the practical and the tactical of like, what have you done, and what are you doing? And I think you've kind of you have a different angle on how you're looking at the industry, and you kind of branded it like the human side of construction. You've written a book. You've been in a variety of different roles. You're a director of operations now, and so I'm excited about having this conversation, talking about some of the challenges that we're facing as an industry, from what I think is a different perspective. So I think maybe to start, like, if you've been in construction your entire career, what was your first job in the industry, and what was the biggest kind of lesson from that job that you still carry with you today?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny, it's cliche, but I always say I didn't choose construction, construction chose me. Just a quick backstory, I took mechanical engineering, and more specializing in HVAC. So when I graduated, I thought I was going to be like the best HVAC engineer in the world. Like that was my goal.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the industry had other plans. It was late 2000s, so just kind of coming out of a recession, and I couldn't find a job as a consultant. And I was living off of hot dogs watching Spike TV. And I was like, you know what? I got to start paying the bills here, guys. This isn't working. So I just started applying to random jobs. And I ended up working for a MEP firm in the east coast of Canada
Hmm.
as a project coordinator. So that was my first role. And one thing I learned really quick there, and something I've carried with me through my career and what I share with younger folks is, you don't know everything, but neither does the guy next to you. So we always have something to learn and we always have something to offer. Just a quick story on that. My very first week it was Black and McDonald out in East Canada, working on the service division. And I got partnered up with a refrigeration tech, Robert Thompson. I'll never forget Robert, East Coaster. And so I was riding around in his truck and we were going to service calls. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm an engineer. Like, what the hell am I doing? Riding around with this rough, tough trades guy. And one call we went to on the second day, I think it was, we walked into a mechanical room and he points to a big piece of metal and says, you know what that is, Mr. Engineer? He was having some fun with me. I go, I have no idea, Robert. He goes, that's a chiller. And I said, holy shit. Like, I remember learning about it. I saw it in a book. I knew how to calculate the heat flow and all that stuff. But until I actually physically saw it,
Yeah.
that's when the light bulb clicked. That's when it clicked and that the light bulb went off. So yeah, you always can learn from somebody, and I continue that, learner's mindset.
I love that. And I love that because one, like, you were open to hearing that and understanding kind of the bigger message from it. But also Robert was willing to tell you that. And, I think one of the things we'll kind of dig into is we have a dwindling quantity of Roberts out there. And how do we solve for that? But I think one of the things that stuck with me that you've said in the past is we've talked a lot about digital transformation, the role AI and tech is going to play, and kind of what that transformation is going to look like. But you have a bit of like a contrarian kind of perspective, which is it's not necessarily just a digital transformation; it's a workforce evolution.
Mhm.
Um, what do you mean by that when you kind of say it's a workforce evolution?
I think going back to like kind of what you were saying in construction, it's very technical, right? Like when you're taught, when you're trained, it's on hard skills,
Hmm.
quantifiable things. Like when you're an estimator, you learn how to do takeoffs. When you're an engineer, you learn how to systems work. When you're a project manager, you learn how to issue RFIs. And when you get into management, you follow SOPs and all that stuff. So we're very good at defining what we're doing. But what gets lost is how we do it. And that's the workforce side. That's the glue that kind of holds everything together. How people make their way through those processes, how people have conversations, because collaboration is huge in construction. It's thrown around as a buzzword a lot, but essentially, when you're on site and you're working with a dozen other trades to get a building done, collaboration, communication is huge, but we don't teach that. So that's really kind of what I focus. So as things kind of evolve and construction takes off more picks up more steam, technology and AI and all that, I see the industry kind of going like this, right? We're focusing heavy on the tech, AI, because it's sexy and it's fun, and it can
Yeah.
improve the industry tons. But it's going to change the way that we do work. So maybe you're more in the space than me. I don't hear a lot of conversations about the human side interacting with AI and how the role of the PC or the PM or the construction manager is going to change because of AI. Yeah, the tools are going to be useful, but do the people know the role that they're going to play, or do they think that tech's just going to replace them? You know what I mean? Am I making sense?
100%. And I think we've talked about this in the past, that in the category of AI, we often we think of the everything as just inevitable, like, and not having control over what ways in which AI influences how these jobs evolve, and it's just not true, right? And we can take a more influential kind of perspective on, let's form what that role, how that PM should evolve, what a PM does in 5-10 years. Let's influence that. What is because maybe along those lines, we do talk about the labor pressure that all of our markets are experiencing, but you don't necessarily see this as like a bodies problem. You see it more as a knowledge transfer issue, which McKinsey certainly hasn't picked up on that yet. How do you see it as really not being a bodies problem?
So I can give you some numbers to kind of frame that, because that's a good question, what I've been thinking a lot about lately. And sometimes it keeps me up at night, to be honest. So the numbers. So let's take the US, for example. Over the next, just wild guess actually, do you know how many people are employed in the construction industry in the US? Putting
Oh
you on the spot
man,
here.
ah, I would
Wild
say
guess.
like in the millions,
Millions, yeah, 10 million.
10 millions.
Documented, okay. So that's office and field, mostly in
Yeah.
the field. So 10 million people. Based on demographics, some reports are saying 30 to 40% are going to retire in the next 5 to 10 years. Okay. So say 30% for easy math, go conservative, that's 3 million people. Okay. Over the next 7-10 years, if you average it out, it's 400,000 a year that are going to be lost to retirement. So then you look at, okay, that sounds like a lot, but people are coming in the industry, right? Government's pushing it, industry's pushing it, associations, micros saying you can make six figures in construction. A lot of people are
Hmm.
signing up. On average in the US, there's about 250,000 new apprentices starting each year, which is, we need 400,000, we're getting 250, not too bad. But then you got to look at the retention side of things, because not everybody that starts finishes. Another wild guess, and sorry I keep putting you on the spot here, what would you guess is the completion rate for an
Hey, I
apprentice?
need to change the terms on my little guest episode outlines.
Okay.
No asking me question.
No, okay, sorry.
No, no, I like this. Sorry, ask the question again.
The completion rate for U.S. apprenticeships. So
Oh, that's a good question.
for say
I would
100
say
people,
60%.
60%,
Is that too low?
that's too high.
Really?
60% drop out. It's about 30 to
Oh man.
35% actually finish. Okay, so you're getting 250,000 starting, but only 100 and change are finishing. So we need 400,000 a year to replace who's retiring. We're getting a quarter of that. The pressure on the industry is just increasing because population is growing, jobs are getting more complex. Data
Hmm.
centers aren't easy to build, hospitals aren't easy to build, roads, you know. The mental health, there's a mental health epidemic. Sorry, I'm on my soapbox now. We
Oh,
lose,
dude,
we lose
I love it.
6,000 people a year due to suicide and 25,000 construction workers due to drug misuse, like overdose.
Hmm.
So, we can't fill the retirees' roles fast enough. We're losing people with these mental health issues, and there's more demand on the industry. So, to me, this is kind of perfect recipe for disaster. So, going back to your question now, yeah, the numbers are scary in itself, but that's assuming that one new entrant replaces one person leaving, which isn't the case, because that person with 30 years experience they're going to work more productive. They're going to solve problems faster. They're going to know what to do. And that person coming in, you're probably going to need five of those to replace just the productivity of the person leaving.
Yeah.
So, and that's where my mind goes to. The numbers are the numbers. Okay, we can shovel bodies in, but the real crux of the problem is the quality of information. Getting
Hmm.
that tacit knowledge that's out of people's heads into some sort of system or some mentorship framework or whatever to help bring these younger people up to speed faster, because that's what we really need. Make sense?
Well, it does. And I think your like tertiary point is that by creating that human connection and engagement and leaning into the fact that we are tribal beings, would potentially impact and lower the retention or increase retention,
Hmm.
and maybe lower some of those mental health related dropouts as well. Is that kind of the other point as well?
I think it's two things on the retention side. One, culture for sure. Like the construction culture is not the most accepting and inclusive. And I don't mean that from like a DEI perspective, just literally like accepting new people into the
Yeah.
industry. Hazing is still a problem on site. The tough mentality, suck it up, be a man, grow a pair, leave your feelings at the gate. You know, not acknowledging, like now there's a huge conversation around mental health, neurodivergence, ADHD, all this stuff. So people are aware that they're coming in with these types of disabilities.
Hmm.
I don't mean that in a bad way, but they're not being accommodated, right? So they're like, you know what? I saw it on TV. My parents told me the trades were great. You can make a lot of money, but I show up on site and I got to deal with this old dude who's a jerk. And I get my first paycheck and I'm not making much more than at Burger King, because when you start as a first year, it's not much off minimum wage. So there's a expectation versus reality mismatch and a culture problem. I think those are things we have to address to, resolve some of the retention issues we're seeing.
So tech doesn't solve all this. So I mean, when we when we look at most of our audience is either building or buying construction tech in some capacity,
Hmm.
and we've kind of all been exposed to some variety of marketing, which kind of positions themselves as the solve to either this labor issue or knowledge transfer. Like, what are some of the things that maybe both sides of that equation, the builder and the buyer, are getting wrong about tech right now?
So tech, from what I've seen, especially around AI, it's advancing now. Before it was kind of like I saw the term AI wrapper. So you have your information and you have an AI system that wraps around it. And yeah, it can summarize things, it can pull information out, which is great, and that helps save time. But only if you know what you're looking for. For
Yeah.
example, agentic AI. You can set up a workflow to issue an RFI or look for discrepancies in drawings. But if you don't prompt it, you know what I mean? If you don't start that process, it doesn't know what to do. It's really good at doing it really quickly. And that tech is going to definitely help the quantity problem we're experiencing, because we're going to have less workers to do more. So if you have less workers but they're skilled and they know what they're doing and they just need something to process information faster, tech will definitely help there. But in terms of capturing the quality of that knowledge and transferring it, from what I've seen, I don't think we're there yet. I have hope
Hmm.
that down the line something's going to come up. Maybe we can build it, Steven. I don't know. But like something's going to come up that will help bridge that. But so tech definitely plays a role in the quantity, because as the demand grows and the supply is still limited, tech's
Yeah.
going to fill that gap.
Yeah.
But it's missing that element of quality, I think.
Well, and Nate Fuller has a report out. Well, maybe it's not out yet. AGI in construction, and I think he does a good job of kind of documenting some of the current use cases of where AI is adding value, and
Hmm.
then kind of projecting out where what that could look like. And um, to your point, I think tech does play a role. I think increasingly the existence of kind of citizen developers, PEs, PMs, supers who understand their workflows deeply and now have access to tools like Lovable and Cursor and Replit to actually build at least prototypes and kind of small functional apps to
Hmm.
solve those problems. I think is obviously already happening. It's on the increase. And what I appreciate about you is you understand the role that tech can play, but deeply kind of appreciate the human side. And so you've built a website called Build Mentor,
Hmm.
which is in theory a forum where some of this kind of knowledge exchange can happen. How can you speak to me about maybe the evolution of how you came to, well, if it doesn't exist, I need to build it.
Yeah, so one big part I saw, a gap I saw was in mentorship and coaching. Because, like, we've talked about at length already, a lot of people leaving, new people coming in, huge gap in the middle we need to fill. And to me, that gap can be filled by mentorship and coaching. We don't
Hmm.
have time to do it one to one, so my take was on one to many. So there's a lot of experienced people. Like, I've been doing this 20 years. I have a lot of knowledge in my head. Some stuff I don't even know, but I can access at different times or whatever if I see if a light bulb goes off. So I said, I was thinking, how can we create a forum or a tool to capture that knowledge? So the website I've built, and it's kind of early days, but I've got a beta out. It's a mentorship matching platform. So you basically create a profile, your background, what you're hoping to gain, and what matches you with other mentors or mentees in the system. But then there's also like a knowledge hub. So over the years, I've kind of kept an Excel sheet. I'm old school, I like Excel, uh, of lessons learned, right? What happened? How did I fix it? How would I have avoided it? And I've kind of built it up over the years. And I pumped it into this system, and it created essentially lessons learned cards that you could search. If you want a specific trade or a specific issue, it'll pull up relevant ones. And the idea is for people to go in and add to that. Taking it a step further, as people connect and have conversations, maybe, and again, it's early days, but maybe there's a messaging or a video feature through the app that records the conversations and then codifies, if there's specific questions or specific lessons learned. And then it just kind of keeps building off of that. Because the thing is with that, Stephen, like people I've talked to, and I've pitched this idea to different companies too, right? Because I thought at an enterprise level, this would be very valuable to have your company's lessons learned that people can draw from, right? And they might not necessarily want it open source. Two things there. One, I think companies do a terrible job of documenting this stuff. I think if they
Yes.
just sat down with their senior people, supers and PMs, and said, okay, what happened on this job? They'll tell you 10 things that went wrong and 10 things that went good. And then you need to capture all of that and have it accessible to people instead of just, one-off conversations like in the lunchroom. Oh, yeah, how's it going? Oh, I'm experiencing this challenge. Well, actually, I did that on another job. You know what I mean? It shouldn't be informal. This stuff needs to be structured.
Yeah.
The second point on that, people are like, they think they have the secret sauce or the Coca-Cola recipe. We're all doing the same shit, Stephen, and we're all
Yeah.
fucking up in the same ways. We're all making the same mistakes. So to me,
Yeah.
there would be a benefit in open sourcing this. It would help the industry because we're all in the same boat. We're all pulling from the same labor pool. So let's equip our people with the information and the tools they need to do a good job, right? Because it's going to cost you less money in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about this before on the podcast. I think there is just a misunderstanding of IP in the industry, and such a large quantity of project data isn't IP. But the true IP is kind of stuck in the brains of your workforce, and until you figure out ways to digitize that, but also digitize it in a way that isn't just extracting their value, but creating kind of an incentive structure to make that operate. I think we're going to be stuck, and we do need some tools. So I'm glad you're building them. Um, have you been able to lean into some of the like no code, low code type solutions to build this, or have you partnered with a dev team? What's been your approach?
So my approach was, so I started out with a tech incubator here in Toronto, and I kind of pitched the idea. They weren't too enthused. I pitched them kind of an alternate idea. We started going down the path, and ultimately they saw a challenge with the consistency of data across organizations, right?
Mm.
Because if some people have no information, some people have scattered information, so they didn't see it at a B to B type level. So I thought, and then I came across Lovable. You mentioned Lovable, and I thought, you know what? Maybe I'll just give it a go. So I started with a quick little prompt, and then it generated a couple pages, and then I saw the power of it, and I was like, okay, well, so I put probably 40 hours into it, 40, 60 hours just in the evenings and weekends, and then I built out now. I won't say fully functioning, but it's essentially a prototype of this thing. So So yeah, there's huge power in that. And
Hmm.
yeah, if you were an actual dev team or a coder and you went into the back end, I'm sure it's just an absolute mess. But
Yeah.
but in terms of
Yeah.
just getting in and playing around and seeing the power of it, now I'm thinking, okay, well, what else can I do with this thing? What can I bring to even my professional job at Matina? Like maybe we can build some sort of in-house solution to solve those problems, or at least get 75% of the way there. You know what I mean?
Right. At least a better handoff to a tech team if
Hmm.
they need to harden it and add the security compliance. Yeah. Um, a large majority of our listeners are kind of still frontline operators in field operations, right? And and so when you think about these problems around knowledge capture and transfer from an individual standpoint, what do you think a young PM or young super should do today? And not just maybe kind of process wise, but like tech tools. Is there ways to kind of build a moat around your IP and your leverage to put you in a better position for your career, depending on what's going to happen with AI and tech and all these things?
Yeah. My advice, I guess, two things. One, I'll give one on the tech side and one on the non-tech side. But on the tech side, definitely be aware of the tools that are out there. ChatGPT is like the gateway drug, but it's super useful, not just for like a one-off search. Have conversations, man. Refine things. You could talk about if you want to refine your career path. What courses should I take? What connections do I need to make? If you're working on a project plan or a specific, like, don't just put in a search and take what it, you know, ask it to ask you clarifying questions. Have a
Hmm.
conversation with it, and it'll help really refine things, summarize it, maybe it go in different directions. Lovable, a perfect example, like if you have an idea on how to improve a process or build a system or whatever, definitely play with that. I suggest that's a very powerful tool. And so, yeah, on the tech side, just be aware of what's out there. Tune into webinars. Follow Stephen Poppe. You're probably already, because you're listening to this podcast, but stay ahead of the curve because it changes every day. On the
Hmm.
non-technical side, just go out there and connect with people. Like what
Yeah.
I'm seeing is more and more of a reliance. 50% of the emails I see now, A, probably don't need to be emails because they're within our office and people could just come over and talk to me.
Yeah.
And B, you can tell they're copy pasted from ChatGPT. So that might contradict what I said previously. It's a powerful tool, but don't take it for face value because you
Yeah.
know when it's AI generated, right?
Yeah.
So go out, connect with people, have conversations. We're still humans at the end of the day. Tech's going to help us, but it's still boots on the ground, installing pipe, installing conduit, laying block for now. It's not going to be robots in the next little bit.
Yeah.
And humans crave that interaction. Sitting down face to face, looking somebody in the eye, having a conversation is 100 times more effective than an email that ChatGPT or Copilot helped you craft.
Man, that is so true. I mean, I think still remembering that everything that comes from you is still a part of your brand. And I don't think in this industry we like to talk about that, but it's true, right? We all have a brand. And I think if, you over leverage the tools in that way and they use them as an easy button instead of a thought partner, to your point, not only do you compromise your brand, but you also like it does damage to your brain. Like
Yeah.
longitudinal studies show the impact of phones on brains,
Hmm.
and it's not great. And so AI is obviously going to accelerate some kind of brain evolution that probably is not in our favor. Did you see? I think Tesla in their earnings report,
Hmm.
they're shutting down two of their models. I think it's
Hmm.
S and X, and they're going to be pumping out 1 million humanoids a year. Is their goal? Um, and so, I mean, that's a data point. Like
Hmm.
to understand what humanoids are going to do. Obviously, there's a lot of line in that thread of where they end up. But that was a hard segue. I did have another question on the personnel front. Um, I've recently kind of talked about building your own board of directors and kind of having a community of mentors. Is that something that you benefited in your career?
I would say more, a little bit more if I was intentional about it. Looking
Yeah.
back now, I think a lot of people and people I've talked to, when the topic of mentorship comes up, because it's a critical part of your career, right? And I think some people look at it as a very rigid way and they're like, oh, I'm lost. I don't have a mentor. If you think long and hard enough about, if you can remember one or two people that come to mind instantly, those were mentors. It might have
Yeah.
only been for a project, it might have only been for 2 weeks. A mentor is somebody who imparts knowledge and changes the trajectory of your career and life. I can think of three people off the top of my head. So I wasn't intentional about it. I am now more in my later kind of years, but I wish I was more
Yeah.
conscious of that because that's a very good concept. Because you need it, man. You need that support network, especially in a construction, an industry like construction, where there's so much information. Each
Yeah.
specific trade, it's impossible to know everything about one specific trade, let alone the 120 or whatever there are. So it's not what you know, it's who you know, in the sense that you don't need to have all the answers, but if you can make a phone call to somebody that does, that's the real power for your career.
You've heard me say this before. I'm skeptical of AI that doesn't make the person better, not the company, not the process, the person. That's why Trunk Tools keeps coming up in my conversations. They're building AI that's human centric, designed to strip away the busy work and let experienced builders like you do what they're actually good at. And here's the thing that gets me: the average worker takes about 5.5 hours a week just looking for project data. That's a full day every week lost to digging through files and folders. So Trunk Tools is tackling that head on. Check the link in the description to learn more. Yeah, and I think there's like both sides of that equation creates value. Like the person receiving, obviously there's value, but the person giving is receiving value as well, right?
Hmm.
Like there's just, as you go through your career, you inherently look for ways to pass on certain things that you know, and when you don't have a recipient, there's a gap there. So I wanted to kind of pivot to kind of leadership structures and the different ways that kind of different kinds of companies operate. We've talked a bit about, and I'm a big fan of ESOPs or any kind of profit sharing structure to drive incentives, because
Hmm.
ultimately incentives drive behavior, right? Um, so you've worked at a few different companies. You've kind of operated in owner capacity for a brief time. You've been on the GC side. As you look across maybe your career of the different structures of the companies you've interacted with, how does company ownership kind of drive how culture and employees are treated?
That's a tricky one. So what I've found working, because I've worked for big companies and small too, right?
Yeah.
With bigger companies, it's they almost forget about the people. And I don't mean
Mm.
that they're bad. It's just that when you get past a certain size, you become a corporation. And the people who run corporations are lawyers and accountants because that's what's needed. It's a business entity. And they implement structure, they implement processes. And when people get lumped into cogs in a machine and just following a process and they become just managed, not led, that's where things can kind of break down. And I think there's
Managed,
probably,
not led. That's huge.
yeah,
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 that's huge.
nobody wants to be managed. Like nobody wants to be told, "Hey, Stephen, you missed step 6 in this 10-step process," even though the output was correct. If you didn't, you know
Yeah,
what I mean? Nobody
right.
likes that. But people want to be led. Not in the sense that, "Oh yeah, I'll follow you wherever you go," but they want to be part of a bigger vision. They want to be in touch with the person pulling the strings with the vision. And they want to be part of that. They want to understand, at least my experience tells me. And
Yeah,
that kind of gets lost at bigger companies just because of the layers. And like I said, it's not because they're bad people. You need to have that structure or the thing would completely fall apart. But maintaining that or avoiding that disconnect between corporate and actual operations, the people in the office and the boots on the ground, I think that's the biggest challenge for these bigger construction companies.
man, that's spot on. And obviously, not to get political, but I think the farther, the same kind of concept works in a democracy, right? The farther away you get from the people that you're leading, the harder it is to understand their needs and how to serve them and support them, right?
Yeah,
And so, that's why I would say I'm a big like states' rights kind of person,
yeah.
ultimately. But I think back to corporate structures, I think early in my career, I wanted to go to the bigger companies because it seemed like there was the prestige, there was the kind of the process and exposure to big projects and all these things, and all those things are great.
Hmm.
But I think when you look back, or I look back at my career, there's a place for that. But as I've kind of come and interacted with, whether it was like a smaller startup or now at Via Technic, which is smaller but growing, in comparison to some of the GCs I worked at. You're right. There's just the human connection is there at every level,
Hmm.
and that can get lost. And I think that's one of the things that if we look at what's going to happen or potentially can happen with AI, it's not so much the technology I'm worried about, it's the incentive structures that drive decisions that forget who AI is potentially attempting to serve.
Yeah.
So when you look at those different kind of leadership structures, ownership structures, how how do you think if you were kind of starting a company afresh, um, is there, or maybe let's change the question. If you were a young PM or superintendent today, is there a role, like what's the perfect trajectory of a career? And obviously that's an impossible question,
Mhm.
but is there different things you've learned at the big companies versus the smaller companies?
For sure, yeah. So and I think I know what you're asking. And career trajectory, it depends on your ambitions, right? I knew when I was just starting out, I wanted to be an executive. Like, and that's not for everybody. That's just how my brain worked. Now that I'm almost there, I'm like, I don't know, maybe there's pros and cons to everything.
Yeah.
But the best advice I could give is, regardless of the trajectory you want, is just get exposure to as many different things as you can. Like,
Yeah.
I love construction in general. I've tried different things. I've been a PM, I've been an estimator, I tried the owner side, went to the GC. I found mechanical, that's where my heart lies. That's where I kind of came home to roost. That's what I'm doing now as a specialty trade. But two things about, you know, two good things about working at the different size companies. At a smaller company, it's easier to get exposure to different aspects of the business. I worked at, I'll call it a mom and pop shop, but there were like 6 people in the office when I was in my late 20s. So I was talking directly with the owner. I reported right to the owner. So I got to know a little bit about the financial side. I was hired as a PM, but I helped out in estimating. I helped out in accounts receivable. If people weren't paying, I would go to their door with a baseball bat. No bat. I didn't just show up. But you know what I mean. So I got
Yeah.
exposed to all these different kinds of things, and then so that was really good. At a bigger company, it's a little bit tougher to do that because there's more silos, right?
Yeah.
And that's a very overused term, but there's silos again just because they need that structure to operate. And it's harder to cross that bridge to, like, if you're a project manager that wants to get into estimating, you might have to, there might not be the availability to spend 2 weeks or a month there. You know what I mean? Because there's PMs and there's estimators. Whereas a smaller company, yeah, help out with this one estimate, no problem. It's a little more informal. So I would say earlier on in your career, smaller companies to me, if I was to start again, smaller companies would be good to get different exposure.
Yeah.
But if you do want to make that, you know, that think long term, get into VP, senior VP, president type role, you got to be at the same company for a long time. That's
Yeah.
one thing I've noticed.
Yeah.
And one thing that I'm a little too late in my career now. Like, I would never go to a bigger company now as a VP because you look at people at that role, they've been there 10, 15, 20 years because they've put their time in, they understand the business,
Yeah.
the loyalty aspect. So yeah, does that answer your question?
It does. I mean, you made lemonade out of a very poor lemon of a question, so I'm impressed. Uh,
There you go.
um, so, we talked about kind of mental health and some of the industry challenges. Um, if you think about the role these companies play in contributing to the ingredients that leads to some of these challenges, like I said previously, like incentives drive behavior. How do these companies start to tackle like mental health or job
Mhm.
site conditions or any of these things that seem like so existential in terms of the size of the problem? Um, and yet, I don't think like having a mental health day a year is obviously going to solve the problem. You've had some of these conversations with executives. What is like what are the array of tools that we have to address some of these issues?
There's not a lot out there. I think that's the problem. When the topic of mental health comes up, a lot of people clam up because it's a difficult conversation to talk about, right?
Yeah.
I've never walked away from talking to somebody about suicide or mental illness feeling good about myself. It's
Mhm.
just, it's impossible. So
Yeah.
people shy away from discomfort. Nobody wants to bring discomfort into their life. So that's one thing it's difficult to talk about. Number two, we don't understand a lot about it, right? Because it's not comfortable, even though it's rampant and ubiquitous, not just in construction, like all over the world. There's a stat here in Canada. So the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, KMH, it's a hospital specialized in treating mental illness. They've done a bunch of studies. 50% of Canadians will experience mental illness personally by the time they're 40. Okay. I'm 41. I've been through some shit. Luckily, I haven't been too bad, like, you know, compared to some other stuff from people I've talked to.
Mm.
But yeah, definitely. So, but there's not a lot done with it. There hasn't been a lot of in-depth studies, again, because it's a topic that not a lot of people like to
Right.
broach. Largely, we're in an awareness phase now, I would say. Construction for sure, the broader world. Now we're having these conversations. We're destigmatizing mental illness, and we're starting to understand a little bit more about it. But I don't know if you've ever been to Alcoholics Anonymous. The first step to solving a problem is admitting you have one.
Yeah.
I haven't been to AA, but anyway. So now we've acknowledged that there's a problem, but that's only the first step, and it doesn't fix it. So to your point, how do you fix it? What are the tools? Companies I've seen, a lot of people have like an EAP, right? Employee Assistance Program. To me, that's just to check the box. Like, hey guys, yeah, we have a plan. You know, if you need it, use it. Are people actually using those? I've seen studies where like less than 3% of employees actually use EAP programs, which might be
Mm.
a good thing because they're not struggling. But my
Right.
hunch is that they're struggling in silence and they don't want to talk about it and they don't know how to admit it. So getting to, specific to construction, I mentioned the number before about the number of suicides and overdoses. A lot of those problems, underlying root causes, are not caused by the construction industry. There's a lot of other factors, socioeconomic things. People who traditionally ended up in trades are likely to have neurodivergence, maybe ADHD, maybe dyslexia, didn't do well in school. They got pushed out of the mainstream system. Oh, you can't go to college because you're not smart enough. You just have to settle for working with your hands. So, they have that mentality coming in. They haven't been treated that well. They've been told implicitly or explicitly that they're, less than. People with ADHD, dyslexia, neurodivergence are more predisposed to suffering from mental health issues like addiction, substance misuse, suicidal ideation. Okay, so we're putting all these people in this construction, and then you layer the culture on top of that, right? The transactional nature. If you're in the trades and the jobs coming to a milestone, you're going to get laid off, right? It's just part of the job instability, all these things. But most factors lie outside the construction industry. So some people might say, yeah, you know what, I acknowledge there's an issue, but it's not our fault. I'm a construction owner, I'm a VP.
Yeah.
It's their responsibility to deal with it. Absolutely. You can't fix everybody's problems, but we have a responsibility as leaders and good people to give people the tools they need to fix their problems, not solve them for them. Okay. Number one, it's just good human practice to treat your people and give them what they need to do a good job. But two, and I hate to go here, but ROI, you talk about what's the return on investment. If somebody is showing up to a site and they're not there mentally because they're dealing with something else or they're having a hard time, they're going to be a higher safety risk to themselves and those around them. Okay. If you suffer from a lost time injury or first aid, that's going to impact your TRIR, or I don't know, you might have a different stat in the States for injury reporting. That could it'll increase your insurance premiums. It could impact your potential to do work with some owners, because some owners look at safety requirements.
Mm.
So I don't know where I'm going with this. I think I'm way off of the question. But
No, I think your point is there's a practical input or impact to not addressing some of these challenges,
yeah,
right? And it hits the bottom line.
it hits the bottom line. And right now, that's not quantified. And people say, oh, well, it's going to cost money to implement these tools or have this app or this program. Absolutely, yeah. But what's the cost of not doing something, right? That's what you got to
Yeah,
think.
I think
So,
that's a good point.
yeah.
And there's some structural things, and there's probably lower hanging fruit than others. But when I think of just the traveling nature of our industry, separating people from the folks that they love the most,
Hmm.
for a majority of their weeks probably isn't, it's not ideal. And so how do we better accommodate family life in our industry? And obviously this is just a podcast, so I can just throw out ideas.
Yeah.
But I'm a big believer in individual sovereignty, right? And I think there's value in hoping that systems and entities will kind of approach problems like this. But
Hmm.
when we think about this from the individual standpoint, you're a young PM, you're on a project in a remote city. Um, what are some of the ways that they can position themselves to maybe have career optionality and and give themselves a path to pursue a life that maybe is more in line with what they're looking for? Not necessarily saying that's outside the industry, but I'll give you an example. I was traveling a lot. Every 2 years I was in a new project, and I was dating my now wife, and realized that it was going to be very difficult within this kind of current career that I was on a trajectory
Hmm.
of to kind of do the things I wanted to do with my my wife and build a family and all these things. And so it led me kind of exiting the industry briefly, going into tech. For 4 years, I was a company kind of learning what product development was, learning customer success, what go to market motions look like, and that became invaluable because I was able to then take that and layer it onto my construction experience and give me a whole new lens of what the industry looked like. Um, but how do you look at that as someone who's kind of deep into some of these conversations with a variety of folks? Are there things that individuals can do to kind of better position themselves?
Yes. So one thing, well, two things came to mind as you were talking. Number one, you got to understand yourself, self awareness. For some reason, I don't want to get too much into weird stuff here. Western culture, we're just, you don't acknowledge your intuition, and a lot of people neglect themselves to pursue whatever, the American dream has been set up to be. That's what a lot of people are striving for. I think younger
Yeah.
generation is a little bit different. People, the same vintage of you and I won't label it with a generation or an age, but like I know with my career, I just got on a track. I finished university, I got a job, I got married, we had kids, we got a dog, we got a nice house, and then I was in my 30s, and I was like, I remember the moment I was sitting in my backyard, and I was like, I was looking around. I was like, I didn't make any conscious decisions to get here, and it was
Yeah.
not regret. I want to preface it with that. It was not regret, but I just got on the train. It was on the tracks, and I'm
Yeah.
doing well now because of it. So I can't complain. But I think so. It starts with knowing what you actually want, right?
Mm.
So your own boundaries. Number two, marriage and a family isn't for everybody. I love it. Ever since I was young, I just wanted to be a dad. That was my main goal in life. We've got three kids. I know you've got like 10 now, but I mean, you
Four,
guys have
but they
four?
feel like 10.
Feels like
Yeah.
10. Yeah. So definitely, if that's the route you want to go, even if you want to stay single, if you want to, it's going to take sacrifice.
Yeah.
And not just yourself, your partner and your kids. Like anything worth building takes sacrifice, but it's finding the balance that works for you and your support system. Same with me, right? Like I was previous to coming to Matina, I was when I was with Ellis Don, I was driving 2 hours each way across the city to build a hospital. Awesome job, phenomenal people, loved the work. We got the job done, but it was taking 4 hours times five, sometimes up to 20 hours out of my week away from spending time with my family. That took a lot of sacrifice because my wife
Mm.
had to do pick up and drop off for the kids. I missed some baseball games. So if that doesn't bother you, power to you. To me, it bothered me, and it factored into. And so yeah, it's sitting down and it's planning, right? It's not just going by the seat of your pants, knowing your boundaries, being self-aware, and then using that to shape the direction that you take your career. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's some gems in there. I mean, I think what you're speaking to is like lifestyle design, right? And it,
Mm.
it sounds soft, but I think there's value to being able to sit back and say, like, what do I want my life to look like? And I think purpose is a big part of that. And I think for me, I joke about them feeling like 10 kids, but like, man, your life changes, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Hmm.
And that's a big part of my purpose kind of statement, as well with, I'm a believer. So, my relationship with God as well. But I think being intentional early in your career of what success looks like,
Hmm.
I think is the major point you made there, which I think is excellent. Because I think early it was achievement, money,
Hmm.
and like prestige. And then you get a few of those things and you realize they're pretty empty.
Hmm.
So,
Well, it's and I've been binging different podcasts too, and like sometimes I get into listening to quote unquote successful people, rich people, right? Like there was one, he managed like the biggest hedge fund in the world or something. He was in his 60s or whatever, 70s, but he was talking about the most important things were the things you do and the people you do them with. That's what's important, and that's what's
hmm,
cool about construction, because a lot of people I think get into the industry because they like building cool things with cool people. That's what I
yeah,
get excited about. Like when you can take a drawing or a 3D model and look out a window and actually see the building and people using it and going in and commissioning and all that, like that really turns my crank. And there's a lot of cool people in the industry. So there are a lot of good elements. I don't remember why I started saying that. Sorry, I'm getting old. Yeah.
no, I mean, I think you're right. There's, yeah, I think the whole thing gets redefined as you get a little older. And I turned 40 a few
Mhm.
weeks ago. And, yeah, you start to look back. And for me, it was, you don't see the twists and turns until you maybe get a little bit farther down the road. Man, we're going to just sound like a couple old bags when this episode comes out.
That's fine.
But we'll lean into it. Um, so, one of the things I do appreciate also about the way you've handled your career is I think we get kind of stuck in our tracks of like, oh, I'm a PM, I'm a VP of this, but I think you've kind of broadly looked at, well, what interests me and what do I want to pursue? And
Mhm.
so, yes, you're director of operations, but you've written books now, you're
Mhm.
developing software. Um, what do you think helped you get to a place where you kind of gave yourself the permission to just be like, I'm going to go do these things?
That's a good question, and I don't know if I have an answer because I still wonder why I do a lot of it. Because just like you work and you have a podcast and all this newsletter, and it takes up a lot of time. Um, my biggest thing, what keeps me going, is helping people. I want to leave a legacy, not so people can say, "Oh yeah, Angelo was a good guy and he knew so much and he wrote books," but just I want to help other people learn. I want to make their lives better. I want to make their careers better. So that's for me, the impact I want to leave on the world. And I'm trying. I know construction is a huge $1 trillion industry, but I like to think I'm doing my small part to improve that human experience. And even if it's just validating people's experiences, they don't need to like or follow or whatever. But if they like, oh wow, yeah, that makes sense. To me, that's
Yeah.
how you impact change. That's how you create leverage and build up the momentum for the stuff I'm pushing for.
People should hire you to build out and develop their onboarding programs. Have,
Hmm.
have people talked to you about that?
No, I help that. So that's actually one thing I'm working on right now with the company I'm with.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's sounds great.
I mean, human-centric onboarding should be maybe a focus of more companies. So here's a question: when you look at what's happening with AI, um, one of the side note, have you heard of what's happening with Claudebot, or what's actually called Moltbot now?
No, what's
It's an open source project that this retired engineer created, and it kind of lives on your device. And I started downloading it on my device, and I realized that's a security issue.
mhm,
So I held off. But they it was built, and you can interact with this bot with any of the kind of messaging apps, Discord, Telegram, iMessage, Signal, and it has access to your computer. So people are kind of buying Mac Minis, setting up a whole kind of computer for this kind of true AI assistant.
Hmm.
And one of the kind of stories was they, you set this up and you text message with it, and you can ask it to do certain things. And this one person messaged the Moltbot saying like, "Hey, schedule a reservation at this restaurant." And so the thing kind of navigated via the browser and went to OpenTable, but there wasn't an OpenTable link, and so they called the restaurant, found a software that gave itself a voice, and then communicated with a human to set a reservation for this user successfully, all without issue. And so it's like this new frontier of AI use cases. With that as the backdrop, as like PMs and supers are coming upon what they can do with Lovable, and in parallel, these platforms like Procore and Autodesk are trying to integrate various AI technologies into their suite.
Hmm.
What are some of the things? What's the advice that you'd offer up to the next generation of how to position themselves for kind of this kind of nefarious, maybe potential nefarious wave of new technologies?
I think that's a perfect example of you know, why it's even more important now to learn the non-technical side of the industry, right? Because the technical stuff is going to be taken over by, like, completing a process quickly and efficiently. We don't stand a chance against AI, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But understanding how to connect with people, understanding how jobs actually get built. I know that that might sound counter to what I just mentioned, but to me, understanding the logistics of how things come together, how trades interact on site, the coordination aspect, understanding how to build. I don't see that being taken over by a prompt anytime soon. Like, hey, Claude, build this building, that billboard or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
that's not going to happen. So understanding the nuts and bolts, and then using AI in this technology and that information and experience, that to me is the perfect combination for perfect future in construction. That's what we need. We need builders, Stephen, right? Because
Yeah.
anybody now can use ChatGPT to answer questions, but the information isn't available in models, at least what I've seen, to solve our construction problems alone. Okay, so you need that information in conjunction with the tools to make it happen.
So, do you think we're coming upon an age of like the where the generalist is kind of going to be the one to kind of strive to be rather than the specialist? Because I think since kind of globalism, we've all kind of highly specialized, right?
Mhm.
And as these technologies gain expertise in these very narrow ways, in theory, like we can rise to this like generous layer
Mhm.
and focus on the areas that we can add value, leveraging these different models. Is that how you see it?
100%. That's how, and maybe that's how my brain works. I'm a systems thinker, maybe because I'm a mechanical guy too. On a cooling system, for example, you got a chiller, then you got a cooling tower, then you have fan coils. And I've always been fascinated with how those pieces fit together. I don't really care how the chiller works. I don't care how this works. I'm interested in how all the pieces fit together.
Mm,
So that's what I'm seeing, even as you were talking, right? The technology is the specialist now. It is, but it's only providing us the puzzle pieces. It's up to us, where I see the future going, to put those pieces together in the right configuration to make the full picture, right?
yeah, I think that's true. That's good. So we've focused a lot of the conversation on kind of advice to the next generation. But if you were to kind of have a conversation with your previous self, what do you think you'd like hone in on maybe one lesson learned or something you'd do differently as a result of your experience?
I'm gonna think for a minute on that one. I think it's I don't know. I started with this, but I'll close with it too. It's just you don't know everything, but neither does the guy next to you.
Yeah.
And it's just breaking down that barrier, that fear of like, oh, if I ask a stupid question, because there's been cases where I felt something was not right, or I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't want to say because it wasn't my place, or I didn't want to come across as difficult or whatever. So I definitely, be more open, uh, and you just be yourself, right? Like we talked before about trying to fit into a box and trying to fit down a certain path. That will only get you so far, because if you're living out somebody else's dream, or you're trying to strive for somebody else's standard, you're never going to be happy. And I hesitate to use the word never, but you're never going to be happy. Like
Yeah.
find your own path, uh, and uh, and yeah, don't stop learning.
Yeah, that's good. Where so where can we interact with you if people have questions? You're on LinkedIn, you've got your website. What are some other places to interact with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best. I have a little more fun on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. That's a little more informal stuff, and the comment sections are actually pretty entertaining. I don't know if you're on Instagram or Facebook, but some of the posts, especially around mental health, and when I challenge the notion of construction culture,
Yeah.
automatically people I think toxic masculinity pops in their head, and they get very defensive about that. So it's
Yeah.
kind of funny, but it's more professional on LinkedIn. But I'm on all platforms, man. TikTok, YouTube, it's wherever you get your
What
social.
what are you posting on TikTok? Like actual little videos?
A lot of it is podcast clips. So I've
Yeah.
done a lot of shows like this. So it's clips, little nuggets of wisdom,
That's
or
great.
just cultural norms being challenged. I like doing that, making people think outside the box, and that seems to resonate a lot with younger people, right? Because they're
Yeah.
coming in and they're more likely to ask, "Well, why are we doing it this way?" Like this, whereas before it was just, "Nope, this is how we did it," and you don't ask
Yeah,
questions.
right.
Oh, I think people are into that.
Are you on Substack?
I don't have a Substack, no.
You need to get a Substack. I've really enjoyed that platform.
Yeah.
And you've developed some really good guide material that
Hmm.
would live well in Substack.
Okay.
Um, well, Angelo, thanks for joining me. Any other final comments before we go?
No, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I did want to mention I love your take. I read your newsletters, and I love the cautious optimism you bring to the tech space. Because when everybody's like, "Oh, look at this bright, shiny thing," the way you've approach it is, "Yeah, that's there, and we should be talking about this too." And we need more of that. We need more critical thinking in this world.
Yeah.
So please keep it up. Appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's I live this like weird kind of juxtaposition of a life where I love AI from a personal standpoint and have integrated into a lot of my workflows, and it's created a lot of value for me. And yet at the same time, you can pull the thread on any of these and kind of see where they're going if we're not intentional. So yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks, Angelo, again. This has been great.
Thank you.